How's it going, guys? We're going to go ahead and take a quick second to get the link out. Let's see. Okay. Got to track all this down real fast. So what we're going to do before we start with the portfolio review is I'll probably just sculpt for a couple minutes or a little while before we actually get started. And just giving people an opportunity to get in here real fast, and make sure that everyone that I selected is available to see the stream. So let's finish this real quick. All right. Got to get some music for myself as well, and then I think we should be good to go. Where's my headset? So usually when I'm streaming with these headphones on, I like to put a pair of earbuds in as well. So let's do that just so I can have a little something to listen to. Okay, cool. Oops. Yep, don't want to play that live because that will get me in trouble. How's everyone's morning going? Hopefully you guys are doing good. Thank you for everyone for coming out. Oops. Okay, so got that one in. Can you double the audio? Is it
2.
Quiet? Okay. Does audio sound good? Audio's a little low. Okay, let me too low. Let's see. How do I add gain to this? Because this is the first time using this headset for these streams, so we may have to adjust just a touch. That's weird. Okay, let's see. Does this sound better? Is that better? Do I need to go higher? Better? Better? Still too low? Hopefully that's... Okay, how does that sound? Is that better? Still the same. Okay. See, this is what happens. You don't test out the equipment and then... is that better? That's weird. Okay, I don't know exactly how to get that to work. So it still sounds the same for you guys, because if that's the case, then I'll switch back to my other headset that hopefully I can have a little bit more control over. Let's do 500. Does that sound better? Your mic should be double for the sound. Does that sound okay? It's showing my output is a lot higher, so hopefully that sounds better. That sounds good? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, cool. Not too loud though, right? I don't want to be like yelling at you guys. Okay, cool. Much better. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. If there's any issues with the sound again, just let me know. And, I guess that kind of took up the time that I was going to do to sculpt a little bit. But so we'll just give it a couple more minutes before we get started. So let me make sure that I didn't miss any questions. First time seeing you with a webcam. Yeah, that's just specifically for this stream. I don't know if I'll keep doing this in the future, but I felt like it was a little bit more personal to have a face cam while I was streaming for the portfolio reviews. So I might do this in the future. I might not. I don't know. It means I have to get ready. I can't just kind of like roll out of bed like I normally do. So I think that it also kind of just depends on the time of day. But so for everyone coming in, thank you. We already have a good number in here. 29 people's a good turnout for this quickly. Face cam seems good to you. Good. Hopefully it's, adds a little something. I don't know. But yeah, so thank you everyone for everyone who submitted for the portfolio review. There was a lot of people. Lots of people, a lot more people than I expected that submitted portfolios. There was probably like over 100. So I have a couple of portfolios selected that I'm going to look at. And to kind of preface how I normally like to do these is I'll just look at your portfolio. I asked a couple of questions in terms of what it is that you want to do and where you want to work. I think that those are two very big pivotal kind of questions for doing a portfolio review. So I have people's answers to those. So we'll take a look at their answers and hopefully I can just kind of give a little bit of input as to what you should incorporate in your portfolio or what are things that are good to have when applying to specific studios and just things like that. So hopefully this is helpful. I think that there's a lot of this information that's probably applicable to everyone that's kind of trying to build a portfolio and submit this stuff to different studios. So hopefully you can find some like little nuggets and things like that. So we'll just sculpt this tooth real quick and then we'll get started because we already have a decent number of people in here. But I was planning on sculpting a little bit. I wasn't thinking people were going to get in here quite as fast. So we'll try and do this one real quick. How's everyone's weekend going so far? Nice hat you have there. Thank you. I appreciate it. This was a gift from my wife for my birthday. It is the mascot for where I was born at, the Albuquerque Dukes. It was an old baseball team old AAA baseball team before they rebranded. So the mascot from where I'm from. Before starting, wanted to ask what texture maps are being used for a game character. Do I get it right that normal map is usually used for games, for pores, for example, and displacement for CG? Yeah, that's correct. We don't use displacement for characters in games. I wish we could. It'd be cool, but it's not optimal. It doesn't run performant-wise, so we don't use displacement maps. We just use normal maps. The other maps that we use is we follow a PBR workflow. So we do a metalness map to describe the metallicness of a material. We use a roughness map, which is describing the surface imperfections. So how much microstructure is going on the surface. So like if you look at a mirror ball, that has a completely perfect it's an unrough surface, so there's not a lot of imperfections going on the surface. So that's why it bounces back a lot more light. Whereas if you look at something like fabric, where it has a tendency of being more rough, there's a lot more faceting. So when light particles hit it and bounce off, that is producing a rougher look because the light's being scattered and kind of blurred as opposed to with like a mirror ball. And then we use ambient occlusion. We do use some other utility maps to describe things like subsurface scattering or fuzz, but those are usually just like black and white masks, sometimes specular depending on the workflow. How will I know if my portfolio is going to be shown? If your portfolio is going to be shown, I reached out and talked to those people. Like I said at the beginning, there was a lot of people, so if yours wasn't chosen for this one, I do apologize. I had probably over 100 submissions, and the first time I did this, I reviewed everyone that submitted their portfolios, and it was kind of taxing, so I kind of have to limit it to just a couple. That being said, this isn't like a one-time only kind of thing. I will do this more in the future. I've had to take a break from these for a little while just because I've been really busy, but I'll have one scheduled probably sometime for next month as well, so keep an eye out for that. But again, I will say that although even if your piece wasn't selected to be reviewed, don't let that get you down, because I think that there's probably a lot of insight and information that will hopefully still be useful to you. So, okay, let's finish this bad guy up. Okay, couple of big marks that I want to knock down. let's do kind of accentuate that ridge a little bit. And then knock some of this stuff down. Dude's got some really bad teeth. But okay, cool. So we'll save this real quick and then we will get started. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. Let's lower that desktop audio just a touch in case that happens again. Is this sound low or is it just me? Is it still low? Because I bumped it up. So I bumped it up pretty loud. So I would check your sound as well if it still sounds low. If it still sounds low for everyone, just let me know. Okay, good to you. Okay, thank you, Alex. Okay, so let's close this, and then we will get started real quick. Let's see. I think the fact that you choose portfolios to review is a good thing. That makes people know that we're not good enough, but the emotional damage is not as bad as being rejected by the company. No, that definitely don't think it's not because you're good enough or whatever. I try to pick kind of a range of portfolios. I try to pick things, that I feel like are applicable, or that I have stuff I feel like I can say too. So definitely don't think that it has anything to do with your skill or not your skill. So the first portfolio that we have is a shot. So I sent out the questions. What is it that you want to do, and where do you want to work? And so his response was, "Hi, Jared. I want to work as a creature and character artist, working in a studio where I can gain the necessary experience. ILM, Weta Digital, NPC, Sony Santa Monica, CD Projekt Red. These are my dream studios for now." Okay, cool. So right off the bat, one thing that I wanted to say is all of those studios have one thing in common. And those one things are photorealism. And also the studios that you described as you described VFX as well as games. So just know that both of those have two similar pipelines, but for portfolios, they like to see different things. I can't really speak as much to what a VFX portfolio likes to see. I would assume more of like kind of high cinematic quality renders, going through the process of modeling, texturing, having a quote unquote low poly, showing things like your displacement map, having a groom, so on and so forth. For games, what we like to see is kind of the same thing, all of your steps incorporated into your portfolio. But again, going back to the studios that you mentioned, the first thing that I'm noticing is your style and the things that you like to make, they don't really align with those goals. So there's a lot of good stuff here, a lot of like cool looking creatures, but all of these characters are a lot more stylized, and those studios that you pointed out are all like realistic, pretty high realism studios. So that's the first thing that I would mention, is if those are kind of where you want to end up, just remember to start tailoring your portfolio in those directions. Think about, what does Sony Santa Monica make, right? God of War. They're all realistic looking people that are kind of like either based off scan data or they're just kind of more realistic stylization and representation of people in general. So keep that in mind. So let's see. Was waiting for this review. Good to hear. Because sending my portfolio to company but hearing nothing back causes me devastating enough. Yeah, that happens. Unfortunately, that is something that comes up in the game industry. It's not uncommon. Don't get discouraged by it. It happens to the best of us. So definitely don't think it's just you. What's the best way for art block? I'll answer that question later. Is there any chance of adding one more portfolio into today's stream if you got time? Unfortunately, no. Just because the fact that I had like 100 portfolios, and I have like 6 that I'm going to look at. So again, back to this. So like I said, right off the bat, I think that there's a really good cool style to these. I like what I see. Um, let's just kind of click through and take a look at a couple of these. So some good stuff on these, some interesting kind of creatures and things like that. Nice to see a little bit of the breakdown of the steps. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that these characters have a lot of personality to them. This one, this is a good thing to have. So, what I think the other two pieces that I just saw are missing is they were just sculpts, and personally, that's fine to have in your portfolio, but I would just be careful with it because in a lot of cases, it kind of just shows that you aren't finishing a piece. Um, and you want to show a character, you want to show the studios, hey, I can make a game character similar to how you're showing here. You're showing the breakdown of like you're using a normal map, you're using a spec map, you're using a roughness map, and your albedo map. So you're providing a lot more information as to show that you can do the job. So with this character, I think that there's some cool stylization to it, some cool proportion. It's fun, it's creative. I think the only thing that I would recommend for this piece that could use a little bit more work is just kind of playing with the materials a little bit more. There isn't a ton to differentiate material to material. So the rock kind of feels similar to the leather feels similar to the cloth, the rock feels similar to the cloth, and then the skin kind of feels like it touches all of those. So you just want to work on like kind of a clear distinction of your material definition. But overall, I think this is a cool piece. It's definitely headed in the right direction, especially showing kind of like the breakdown of all the information. This is all good stuff to see. Your kind of step by step in process and showing a turnaround. Another thing that I would recommend for this piece that I think would help it, and this kind of goes for a lot of portfolios. T poses are fine sometimes, but if you can put your character in a pose and kind of just sell it a little bit further, it's kind of just a nice little addition on top of your character. So definitely, I think that this could be like a cool character to pose, and that would just further improve this piece. Again, cool piece. This one, I think that there's a lot of cool stylization and interesting stuff going on. What I would recommend for this piece, kind of like the first two, is taking it a step further. So maybe somehow finding an opportunity to texture it, turn it into a game res character where it has topology, UVs, and things like that. The sculpts are cool, but in a game production setting, this isn't quite as applicable to me. It doesn't show that you have those underlying skills like the last piece did. But overall, I think that there's some cool anatomy on here. I think that this is a good piece. Definitely don't have to get rid of it or anything, but you could push it a little bit further. Same with this one. This one's a really cool piece. I like the stylization for it. And I think that this is a great piece to, I know that you pointed out wanting to work at like Santa Monica or CD Project Red or something like that. But just on first glance, this is a cool piece that I think if you were to turn it into a low res and kind of apply this same painterly style in more of a hand painted approach would be a really good strong piece. There's a lot of cool form and flow to it, a pretty solid understanding of anatomy going on. There's not anything that like stands out to me like, oh, that kind of seems anatomically weird. There's a lot of like cool rhythms and things like that. How the arms are flowing through and the forearms are flowing into the hands. Yeah, I think that this is a really good piece. I just definitely would take this a little bit further. It looks like it's kind of just painted inside of ZBrush or something like that. I would take it, give it like that whole hand painted approach or something like that, or even maybe like make this a realistic interpretation, kind of like a Pixar style. I think would be really really cool to see. And then again, this pose, this is really cool. This is good to see. I love to see this stuff. So overall, yeah, a lot of really good stuff in this portfolio. I think that it just needs to go that extra little 10%, which is something that I think is very useful for everyone to kind of take note of, is going through the whole process of making a character, putting it in a T pose, and then you're like, I have the textures, I have all that stuff, and you just throw it on your portfolio that way. That's fine, but it kind of does a disservice to the work that you did. So if you leave things in a T pose, you're kind of missing out on extra I guess, brownie points to some extent. Um, so don't skimp out towards the end. You know, make sure to put it in a nice presentation, get some nice light on it, really kind of accentuate all of the work that you did. And I think a lot of these pieces have that. There's good presentation to it, there's some cool stylization to it, um, a lot of like fun colors and interesting things going on. Overall, the sculpting looks good to me. Anatomy looks like it's there. The big things that I would recommend for the portfolio, just take them a little bit further, and also take the studios that you listed to me and start to take note of what it is that they do, um, from a day-to-day perspective, because you want to make sure that you are kind of matching that style. They want to know that you can integrate quickly. Whereas if you were to send a portfolio like this, I think that they would look at it the same way that I'm looking at it and go, oh, there's a lot of cool stuff in here, but this doesn't really help us make the next God of War, you know? So just keep note of those things. So I would start to potentially work on adding more. Um, Sorry, I was getting a phone call. I would potentially work on adding more realistic stuff, and in those realistic pieces, showing things like material definition and creating believable shaders and things like that. But yeah, overall, good portfolio. A lot of really good stuff in this one. But those are a couple of the notes that I had had just in terms of trying to kind of lead you in that direction of getting to somewhere like Sony Santa Monica or CD Projekt Red. So let's catch up on the chat real quick. With art block, think about some ideas while you work on your current piece, write them down. So what you've done to transition quickly. Personally, yeah, I think with art block, I can't really say that I've had too much issues with art block, thankfully. Um, but I think the best thing to do is kind of just start something. Find a character that you like, sit down, start it, maybe create a schedule with it, and so that you can plan it out, and then you have like kind of deadlines going on. Um, okay, 1 second. Back. Sorry, my wife was calling me, so I just had to tell her I was in the middle of a stream real quick. So yeah, I would definitely say creating a schedule for yourself, something like that, is really useful. I don't get art block, but I get burned out a lot. If you're getting burned out a lot, what I would do is schedule a time, or I mean, this is me personally, and I think part of why I don't necessarily get burnout is because I kind of try to schedule or give myself deadlines on things. Or I try not to like overwork myself. If I'm feeling it, I do it, but starting to create kind of a routine out of it. So, you know, every day waking up, I sculpt for an hour. It doesn't have to be the most productive hour, but it's just kind of an hour to get in there and do it. And then I stop, go about my day, do my own thing, go enjoy life, you know, go enjoy spending time with my wife and things like that. So that's might help. I'm not too sure. I would try it out, see if maybe that helps, but I don't know. Where to send your portfolio. So submissions for portfolios are closed right now. I had a link open on my Instagram for the last 2 days for people to submit. So that was where I had people submit. And at this point, there was over like 100 people that submitted. So we're not going to take any more submissions for that for this stream, but we'll definitely have one next month. So hopefully you can be a part of that. Also ask for reviews and see what they would suggest to make your portfolio better. Yeah. I think that that's also another thing is, you know, talk to friends about art, work with friends. If you're kind of feeling art blocked, just throw on some music, sit in a group call with some people and just try and work together. Is it possible to get hired with just one very good piece in your portfolio in the game industry? Yes. You definitely don't need to have 5 really great pieces. In a lot of cases, quality is a lot better than quantity. You can get a job with one piece. It has to be very good, and you have to be able to prove that you can do the job. But you can definitely get a job with just one piece. But it just has to be very good. I didn't find where to send my portfolio, so I'm sending it here. Yeah, so Boomer, like I said, we aren't taking any more submissions, unfortunately. I try to limit how much I do on the weekends to prevent burnout. Yeah, I would say that that's another thing too. The weekends are for you to enjoy. Enjoy them, spend time with friends, family, go places, be outside, and enjoy your time. Definitely don't feel like you constantly have to be doing work every single waking minute of the day. Trust me, I get it. I like to work, and if I didn't have a very loving wife that got me away from the computer, I would probably overwork myself. So yeah, definitely take steps away. Go enjoy life. Art isn't the only end all be all. There's a lot of other aspects to life. So uh, definitely do that. Okay, so next we have Brandon. Okay, cool. So Brandon's has a little bit of a different portfolio than what we just saw. So to read Brandon's response, hey Jared, thanks for choosing my portfolio for review. I want to be a character artist for the game industry. Ideally, I would like to work on a 3D open world game, creating characters that would either play as or against. Some games that come to mind would be Bethesda titles like Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, and Starfield, God of War 2018, and Ragnarok, The Last of Us, Final Fantasy. Just about every game made by From Software are all games I would love to work on. I want to work for any of the studios that created the games that I mentioned. So Bethesda, Santa Monica, Naughty Dog, Square Enix, From Software, and all the studios. And I would want a job, or all the studios that I would want a job at. If I had to pick one, however, it would be Bethesda Game Studios. Cool. So I think that is good to know. I think that so far, you are kind of headed in that style of what I would expect from a studio like that. So we'll just kind of jump right in here, and hopefully, I can give you a little bit of feedback on some of this stuff. Good to see the like triangle count and the hair count and all of the breakdowns of that stuff. It's not necessary to show that stuff, but it's definitely good to see. Good to kind of know that so that I have a little bit of a perception to kind of gauge that stuff off of. Okay, cool. So yeah, a lot of good stuff going on in here. I do have a couple of things that I'll note, but first I'll go back to the other piece and we can take a look at this one next. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So the first thing that I want to start off with mentioning is it's good to see all of this information provided. Like I mentioned before, I think that there's a lot of good stuff in seeing things like your wireframe, some of your different texture maps, and like how you essentially broke up your texture sets. This is all good to see. This breakdown is good to see. I'm assuming that this is how your texture sets are broken up as well, which is breakdown planning. Yeah, good to see. Good to see. So I like to see all of this stuff. Same with this as well. One thing right off the bat that I think that could help this is, since I see kind of the concept that you're going for, trying to get him out of the T pose. I think that that would be an area that just can add a little bit more personality and character to him. But overall, the one thing that I did want to mention is I think that your materials are headed in the right direction, but I do think that there is a little bit of room for improvement on some of them, especially like your skin. There are areas that are feeling a little bit flat. So, what I mean by that is like, especially here in kind of like the pec area, there's it looks like it's kind of it's void of some of like the form that I would expect from that area. So let's see, let's come down here. Like there's a little bit of a highlight in there, but if you look at the concept, there's a lot of really like harsh transitions and kind of plane changes. So those are some of the things that I would try and capture in a silhouette for this, to kind of help you stay true to that concept. Because right now it kind of feels like it's in that same realm of, it's trying to hit realism, but the concept's a little bit more stylized. So I think that you could probably stylize the anatomy and the proportions just a little bit more, so it feels a little bit more interesting. With the skin, I think that this is one area that I did notice right away, is it does feel like it's kind of missing something. The scar looks good, the scar looks cool, but the rest of the skin kind of feels like it just has like the skin tileable applied to it, so it doesn't have any of kind of that nuance or variation that goes into the skin. So it kind of just has a little bit of a flat quality to it. So let's look at the um, yeah, so like it has some kind of AO and stuff on it. There are a lot of bright values, but it's missing like some of the blues and some of the yellows and the oranges that I would expect in skin. So I would definitely say that that area could use a little bit more improvement. Um, let's see. ArtStation like changed how their site works, and I don't know. I don't know if I'm a fan of it. The other thing that I would recommend is, I think, and this kind of goes back to the chest and the torso feeling a little bit flat. Um, I think you have some good silhouette going on in general from a primary form perspective, but I do think you're missing some of the secondary forms, and that is true for not only the body but like the utensils as well. If you look at like here on the cloth and the straps, they feel kind of just like a square. I can't really draw on the screen, but they feel very square. They don't feel like the shape is being broken up to kind of like further refine the shape. So you have a good primary shape on a lot of them, but I think you can work on the secondary shapes. And the same thing applies for the last piece as well. I think that there's some good materials going on. I think those are all headed in the right direction. But you're missing some of those secondary shapes that really kind of accentuate stuff. Same thing with like the torso on this one. There's areas that kind of feel flat on it. And there are some areas in terms of like the silhouette that I do think could use a little bit of improvement. Like here, we kind of have like an awkward, like the tubey arm sort of tucked up area, and there isn't really much definition on the deltoid. And the deltoid also kind of melds into the bicep, and the bicep is melding into the forearm. And you aren't really getting some of those like nice rhythms that you would expect for a figure like this. And if we come down to the concept, we might be able to see kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah, so they're subtle, but there's kind of these subtle little plane changes that are going on that I feel like you could probably further enhance a little bit on your sculpt. Um, Oops, I just lost one of my headphones. I don't know where it is. There it is. I'll take that one out. Um, let's see. Again, also good to see some of the planning that you have going on. There's a couple of areas that I do think you might be able to refine a little bit more in terms of um, the kind of like harshness of the edges. Like especially with the top on this one, this feels like a like kind of really thin. Like there's not much thickness to it, and it feels very straight. So you can have things like that, but you want to make sure that it feels kind of thick and believable, like something that was meant to be cloth across would feel. And same thing with like up here, the bandana going on. It feels like a very, very harsh line. And in my head, I'm kind of like, well, how is that hanging on? It doesn't. It feels like it could fall off at any moment. So some of those things, just take note of those. Um, there's some, like I said, the material work I think is pretty much there. This character could also there is a pose for it, so that's good to see. But the other thing that I was noticing, and especially with this one, you can see it kind of back here on the amplifier. Be careful with how hard some of these edges are, because a lot of you have a lot of harsh edges, and this kind of even goes into what I was saying with like the covering, as well as like some of these other things that you have on the model. All of the edges feel very harsh, so like I could like wipe my finger across it and it could like cut my finger. And that's one thing that's very prominent for people's work in CG. It kind of has that perfection perfect edge feel. You want to break that. That's something that you definitely want to kind of refine and not have in your models, because it's like a dead giveaway that something was made in 3D. Um, but yeah, overall, I think there's a lot of good things to. Oops, let's go back real quick. There's a lot of good things in the portfolio. I think you are definitely headed in the direction of the studios that you want. Those are just a couple of things that I would recommend adding in that I think that could help. The other thing that I would recommend is maybe going and looking at someone from those studios that you want to work at, like Bethesda, and just see what else is in their portfolio. I'm not too familiar with people's portfolios for there. I think that this is headed in the right direction, but you might be able to get a little bit more of an idea of things that you could add in there. Um, but I will say this, just looking at the two pieces, I definitely think that there's an improvement in this one from this one, especially even in the anatomy department. I think that it could still use a little bit of work, but you're definitely feeling a lot more believable in what you represent for your anatomy. So yeah, really nice job with this one. Um, the things that I would take away from it is just work on those secondary shapes for the model. Those, make sure that those are there. Don't just go from your kind of primary block out to adding the detail. I know everyone likes to get to the detail, but make sure to really refine those secondary forms. Especially like in areas like the body, and adding some of those like secondary wrinkles and folds to things like cloth, I think will really help. And yeah, so nice job, Brandon. Hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully I didn't just ramble. I'm trying to give everyone kind of honest and upfront first impressions. So I think there's a lot of good stuff here. I think the secondary forms is really the big one that'll help kind of push your stuff a little bit further. So nice job with that, Brandon. Let's see, who do I have next? To Mateo. Let's see. Okay, cool. So for his response, hi Jared. So my first main goal is to work in the VFX studios such as Axis, Blur, Digic, Unit, but I don't let down the opportunity to work in the game industry since the pipeline's very close. Okay, cool. So right away, looking at your stuff, I could definitely tell you want to work in VFX, which is good. That kind of leaves a good first impression. Let's just kind of scroll through some of these images. Oh, definitely not going to go down further on that one because there is nudity. I did not pre-screen these, so we'll make sure to not go too far down because I don't want to get canceled for this video or get this video removed. So, okay. Cool. So yeah, I definitely feel like there has been a improvement from piece to piece, which is good. Okay, yeah, this one looks good. Okay, cool. So I definitely would say that I think that this is your best piece. A lot of this has some cool, especially this shot. This looks cool. I like this. Um, Overall, I think some things that are really good on all of these pieces is I feel like your shading is pretty much there. I feel like most of the materials feel like I would expect them to. There's a couple of spots that could probably use a little bit more reinforcement. Like this shirt, it's kind of a little bit hard to tell. Um, it's a little bit hard to tell like what the fabric is meant to be. It feels maybe like it could be paper or something like that, and it's missing a little bit of those secondary forms. The skin, I would say that the skin feels good on all of these pieces. The big thing that I feel like is sticking out to me that could use some refinement on these pieces, um, and it's mostly like this piece, uh, this piece, even this piece a little bit, and this one not as much, the two humans not as much, but I feel like you're missing a level of symmetry breakup on them, especially in this face. This face is perfectly symmetrical, and it kind of just draws my eye there initially, and I can't unsee it. So that's definitely one thing that I would make sure to address in all of your faces is getting some level of secondary breakup to the symmetry. That's something that I see a lot of people do is they sculpt a face and they sculpt one side and then they don't like ever move anything around, which is a big no-no because people's faces aren't symmetrical. Usually that is how I sculpt is I'll sculpt half of the face and they'll both be symmetrical and then I'll do a pass to kind of match the other side. To how the symmetry is broken up. So definitely something I would work on for that is just kind of breaking up the symmetry. For this piece in particular, I feel like the silhouette definitely could use some help. It feels like a person, but that's not really what I would expect for kind of like this orc character. I feel like he's missing kind of some of the volume of the lats area, and the quads and the calves are feeling the same volume. And that's kind of the same thing even with the forearms. All of the volumes feel the same. So you end up with kind of like this tubey arm feel. I think that there's some good stuff going on in the shoulders, but widening that out so his upper half feels kind of more big and broad, and those traps are really kind of creating that triangular feel on the upper half of the character. I think would work well. Um, let's see. For this one, like I said, I think that the face looks good on this one. The cloth, I think, could definitely use some work. The other thing that I wanted to address with this one is be careful with how noisy you make this guy, because right now the blood doesn't really read to as blood to me. It kind of just reads as like scuff marks or things like that. There aren't those material properties that are indicating to me that it's supposed to be blood, that it's supposed to like be wet or even dry blood. So definitely think that that could use a little bit of refinement on your texturing front. Same thing as with the orc on this guy. I feel like silhouette wise, the head is looking pretty good, but from the body down, there isn't really much break to the silhouette. It's all just very kind of straight lines. So there's no real defining planes that are breaking up the silhouette that I kind of feel like this guy could use. Good to see it in the pose. Cool to also see some of these different lighting setups, seeing your albedo and your specular and stuff. Yeah, this picture right here, this looks great. This looks really good. Um, but I'm getting a little bit of material response, I think, right here. But yeah, I still do think that the blood could use a little bit of love. And also, I would probably tone down just the overall noisiness of the texture. There's a lot going on, and you can see it right here in the albedo. Like there's a lot of chatter here, here. So it's kind of like my eye is like, well, where do I look? Where do I look? Where do I look? So work on trying to like art direct that a little bit more. So being intentional as to where the blood splattered across the character and not just like it's a generic splatter and then it's like, well, my eye's kind of like pulling me in 10 different directions. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. And then let's see. Let's go back to the portfolio. And again, I think that this guy is good, but I definitely would work on breaking the symmetry of this guy a little bit more. I can tell that like in the forehead, it looks like you added symmetrical forms, but you didn't necessarily break up the symmetry. And so even with the teeth, like he kind of has those bottom two teeth that are perfectly symmetrical. That would be a perfect opportunity to kind of like off shift those a little bit and really kind of like add a lot of personality um to the face. From this direction, you don't notice it quite as much, but the teeth still kind of stand out, and you can still kind of notice it. So definitely something that you guys don't want to miss out on. That asymmetry of the face. You don't have to worry about it for the rest of the body. You know, the rest of the body is usually fine because they're kind of far away from each other on that central axis. But the closer they are together, the more it stands out and the more that they kind of need shifting. Abs is a great example of kind of offsetting those lines as well. So just be careful with that. Same thing with the silhouette on this one. I think that there's an improvement on it. But there is a couple of areas that I think kind of fall a little bit short. Like the transitions to the hands, they kind of just feel very direct, and there's not like a lot of like plane changes. And I think that that could add a little bit of personality to it. So yeah, overall, definitely think that you're in a really good direction for this. I look at the portfolio and I definitely think, oh, VFX, that's where they want to go. And I can say that I have seen a level of improvement from this piece to this piece. Even from this piece, I think that there's an improvement. This piece, I think you could probably take out of your portfolio because I feel like there's a lot of like noise in the renders and the lighting's a little bit harsh and it's not doing quite as much justice as some of these newer pieces. So some like this probably bottom row you may not necessarily need to keep in your portfolio. That's up to you. This piece I definitely would probably say you're good to drop and even this piece. So yeah, overall really nice job with this one. A lot of good shader work, which is cool to see. Um, Texturing looks pretty good. Um, Really, I think the biggest thing is just kind of working on those secondary forms and breaking up the silhouette to kind of not feel so perfectly mirrored over across axes. So, let me take a drink real quick and then I will try and catch up on some of this chat real quick. Okay. Hey there, is it possible is it possible to mainly work on creatures and monsters, basically zero human creatures or human characters? Yeah, I think it is. I think it just depends where you work. Um I would say places like id, I don't think you're really working on human people there. It definitely just depends the studio, but two things with that. One, there's not a lot of jobs that just do character work. There's not a lot of studios that require just character or just creatures. So they're kind of far and few between, but it's possible. Um, and being good at creatures is really really hard. I think it's very very hard for people to just do creatures and usually be just good at that. So that's just my 2 cents. You might be thinking to yourself, oh well, I'm the greatest creature person ever, and you could be. But I do think creatures are very hard, and I do think that a lot of people kind of struggle with them. I know for me personally, I don't think I'm great at creatures. I have fun with them, I enjoy doing them, but you definitely, it definitely takes a lot of skill to be good at them. Definitely study your animal anatomy and your human anatomy, and if you have those in a pretty good place, I think you can make your way by. Um, Really helpful. I think that the barbarian work there is really good, but now I can see where it can be improved. Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jared. Your feedback is spot on, very helpful. Can't thank you enough. Yeah, definitely. And if anyone that I provided feedback with, if you have any questions about the stuff that I kind of suggested, feel free to let me know. Again, this is all kind of like on a whim, on first impressions and things like that. And sometimes my communication skills probably don't do the best way of articulating what I'm thinking. So if I need to kind of expand off that a little bit more, let me know, and I'm happy to do that. Do people get messaged if they get selected by Jared? I'm so lost. Yes. So I messaged the people who were selected for the review today. Hi everyone. Hey, how's it going? Noted. Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, definitely, Tim. Like I said, good job with it. If there's anything that I can expand on, let me know. It's closed for now. Yeah, it's closed for now. Um, yeah, Jared replies really fast. Yeah, honestly, I probably reply too fast because I'm like on my phone a lot. you know, so usually I respond to messages pretty quickly. If I don't, um, there's usually a reason why in terms of like I didn't see it or something like that. So love your stuff, man. How do I get my portfolio critiques? Critiques are closed for today. If you want to get critiqued in the future, I will post on my stories on Instagram. I had my stories posted about this for the last 2 days where people could submit links and stuff. So I'll do that again in the future. Just know that there are a lot of people that want feedback. So I can't necessarily choose everyone. I think we had like over 100 submissions for this one. So definitely feel free to submit it. Can't promise it'll get selected on the next one, but I will do my best. Um, is there a sure way to get selected? No, there is not a sure way to get selected. I go through all of the submissions for the most part, and try and just pick ones that I think I could provide some feedback for at that time. So definitely no sure way. Don't feel like you can bribe me, because I don't need any bribing to pick people's portfolios. So the next one that we have is going to be John, and let's see. Okay, so I've actually talked to Gian in the past, and as you can see, this was his latest piece, and I've told him this before. This is a really good piece, very very strong, um, and because of that, Gian, I think what you could do is you could start removing some of your pieces to kind of bring up the level of your portfolio, because this piece is leaps and bounds better than this piece, and probably this piece. So I think if you feel inclined, I think it would probably be better to at least drop these two pieces, because your newest character is very strong. This one you may not necessarily need to drop, but I do think you have learned a good amount in presentation from this one that you could apply to your Red Lantern piece. So keep note of that. If you want to keep your Red Lantern piece, I would definitely just spend some time to kind of bring it up to the level of quality that this one is in terms of your presentation, your lighting, and just kind of your final renders. And I think that would really help that piece a lot. This Mr. Molotov piece, there's a lot of good stuff headed in the right direction, but I definitely think that the face could use some passive rework, and the materials are okay on this one, but I definitely the sculpting, there's kind of some wobbly forms in the sculpting. So this was from last year, so yeah, definitely a huge improvement from a year to now. So really good job with that one. I know that I think I've told you that this is a really strong piece. So take that as you will. I think it would be a good opportunity to improve at least this one to kind of bring it up to this level. For this piece, let's see. Okay, so there could potentially be some body showing on there. I do think that this one is a little bit weaker than your Hellboy and your Edgar piece. So I think that this one could probably either use some rework or you could remove it. Um, but again, I think that there's a lot of really good stuff on this one. This one looks really cool. Some good sculpting on here. Looks like a face. Yeah, good to see this. See, there's some of that asymmetry in the face. It's not even too much. You might even be able to push it a little bit more. The eyebrows do feel like they have both kind of that same level of archiness. So just be careful with that in the future. But because there is this break in symmetry down here with the cigar, it's not quite as prominent or noticeable. So you could even like raise the left eyebrow a little bit to kind of offset that. And I think that it would never even really be noticeable. But this is a good piece, a lot of character to it. Um, I would say if you could push this into like a game res portrait, that would also be a good opportunity. It looks like this is probably like a rendered in something else. Do you have what it's rendered in? Oh, it's rendered in Arnold. Yeah, I would say if you could, would be a good opportunity to also render it in Marmoset, um, as a game piece. Don't have to do that, but you know, it's a good piece. Got a lot of good stuff. I also just realized I didn't read his response. So he said, I want to be a video game character artist working on realism. Few studios that I would like to work at are Obsidian, Naughty Dog, CD Projekt Red, and Santa Monica. Cool. Um, yeah, I think that you're headed in the right direction with like the characters that you're picking. They're more leaning towards that realism, which is really good. Again, especially with this piece. There's a lot of really good stuff in this piece. I mentioned towards the beginning of the stream, it only takes one really good piece. I definitely think that this is a piece that would land you a job. I think that there's a lot of really good stuff about this. Some good hair, some good skin representation of tone, and the materials look pretty good. I don't see anything that feels too egregious. The leathers feel like leather. Um, Cloth feels like cloth, skin feels like skin. The dreads in the hair look really good. So yeah, I definitely think that there is a lot of great stuff on this piece. This is one of those pieces that will most likely land you your first job. So overall, I don't have a ton of feedback except for I would probably nix this guy. This one you could probably nix, or if you wanted to bring up to that same quality as Edgar, that would be recommended. The Hellboy one, I think, is good as is. You don't really have to touch it if you don't want to. There was just a couple of those notes on things that I saw. But yeah, I would say for those studios, you have a good array of characters. I would just continue to grow off of this Evil West piece and take those lessons and make another piece just to continue to bolster your portfolio. Um, the one thing with that is you just want to make sure going into the next piece, you want to hit this bar and you want to kind of hopefully continue to move further past that bar. So the more characters that you can have at this level in your portfolio, the better you are, and the quicker you'll probably land somewhere. But I definitely think you're headed in the right direction. Um, I don't have too much in terms of forms, texturing, anything like that I feel like I could throw out there. So really nice job with this one. Um, Keep it up. Which, you know, after reading his studios that he would like to look at, I think we're kind of starting to see somewhat of a theme here. I think that everyone that I've asked this question has said, I want to work at Naughty Dog, Santa Monica, um, CD Projekt Red. You know, three of those studios have been mentioned, I think, 3 to 4 times at this point. So that's something to be aware of when you're applying in the game industry. It's competitive. There are a lot of people that apply for these positions, and that being said, don't get discouraged if you apply to Santa Monica and they tell you no. Um, it's not that you're not good enough. It's just that there's a lot of people that want to work at those studios, and not only are you competing with people that are trying to get into the industry, in a lot of cases you're competing with people that are already working in the industry. So getting into the industry is definitely the tallest order to get in. um, but once you're in, it's pretty easy to kind of bounce around and find other jobs, because once you have that quote unquote industry experience, you tend to have positions or studios that are like, hey, I saw your LinkedIn or your portfolio, and you know what you did on X and X game seemed great. Would you like to work on this project? So you get a lot more of those opportunities once you've made your step in the door. So if you guys are still trying to like find jobs and things like that, just know that games aren't the only avenue. Most people in the game industry don't get their first job being in the games industry. A lot of people get their first job at studios doing like learning or um, government contractors, or maybe like visual development for housing, things that aren't necessarily AAA games. AAA games is kind of like the pinnacle, I think, that a lot of people aim for, but there's a lot of people that want to get into it. So definitely don't feel like striking out on your applications is a bad thing. It happens. Um, but there are a lot of opportunities to do 3D and to continue to grow, I guess is my point. So hopefully that's helpful. Sorry, that was kind of just a rambling spiel. But let's see, do we have any questions? Thank you, Jared, for always giving your time to improve our skills and work. Yeah, I mean, hopefully it helps. All of this is just kind of my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. Um, you know, there's a lot of different ways to do things in this industry. No, everyone doesn't have the same story of like, oh, I graduated college, I applied to a studio, I got in right away. For me personally, I graduated college, didn't feel like I was ready, so started taking classes at CGMA, all while working at a government contractor doing environment art and character stuff, but not at a very high level. And then I got into games after that. So everyone has different roads, different stories on how they get in, and in a lot of cases, it takes a lot of time. Took me many times before I got into games. Let's see. But yeah, like I said, hopefully this stuff is helpful. I just try to give some of the information that I wish I had when I was in college trying to get in and, provide that to the community and stuff. So if anything ever sounds harsh, it always just comes from a place of hopefully I'm just trying to help, give some insight. So uh let's see. Just want to say thank you for reviewing portfolios. I watched your last full live stream of portfolio critiques and learned so much. Good. I'm glad to hear that, Emily. Uh, where to submit the portfolio link? Like I said before, portfolio link submission is over for this one. Keep an eye out on my Instagram for the next one, or tune into the streams where I usually will yeah, do that. Hi, Jared. Not sure if you're answering chat questions, but what are tips at getting an entry position in the video game industry? It seems like most positions are entry. Um, that's interesting. I feel like that's the first time I've ever heard someone say most positions are entry. I don't know if I would necessarily say that. Excuse me. Sorry. Mid to senior. Yes, that is true. Most positions are mid to senior because most studios are going to look for people that know what they're doing first before they try and get someone that they're kind of gambling with a little bit. In a lot of cases, you may be from a company perspective, production is usually rolling. So they're trying to find someone that can fit what they need to do and do it quickly. They don't want to pick someone up and go, oh, well, you can kind of sculpt, but we need to teach you silhouette, form, composition, line, all of those different things. They want you just to be able to hit the ground running. So that's usually why they hire mid to senior level artists first, and there's not a lot of junior artists. That being said, I got in as I guess, mid-level artist. I got in as just a base character artist, which I think a lot of people do. So don't feel like you necessarily only have to apply to junior positions. I think in a lot of cases, like a lot of studios don't have a junior position. So if you can prove that you can make characters, you can apply for just a character artist position. So yeah, it's kind of hard. Like I said, getting in is very hard. How about outsourcing studios? Yeah, outsourcing studios are a great opportunity. I think I don't know the bar that they expect. But I would say outsourcing studios are a great opportunity to get experience, to get that kind of AAA experience, and work on multiple projects, which I personally think is cool. The idea of working on God of War and then working on Spider-Man and then working on Star Wars and, just working on a kind of a wide range of games has always been a kind of a cool idea to me. But I think that they're a great opportunity to potentially find a first job, but you just have to kind of explore. Cause I think if I was to be like, hey, what's a outsourcing studio? I don't think a lot of people that are outside of the industry can necessarily know that. But they do exist. You just kind of have to find them. How many times would you say you struck out on legit job opportunities before landing your first? Okay, so this one's a little bit complicated. So sorry for everyone that's in here that's like, oh, now Jared's just rambling. I have a tendency of doing this. So hopefully you guys are cool with it. But like I said, when I graduated college, I had always heard this idea that to get into the game industry, you have to be as good as the people at those studios, which is what I believed. And I do still believe that. I feel like if you want to get in, you have to be able to show that you can make the characters to the level that the studio is making. So that was kind of my drive. So I in college never really felt like, oh, I'm good enough to make characters. I always saw, Raf Grassetti and Glauco Longhi and just so many different artists that I admired, and the level of work that they were creating, and I was like, shoot, my work is nowhere near that, you know. So I never actually applied for a studio, and a lot of that came from my own self doubt, and because I was like, well, my portfolio is not good enough. Well, my portfolio is not good enough. Well, my portfolio is not good enough. And so I kind of just kept pushing the idea off. And then when I was at my first job, I was still working on my own portfolio, still attending classes and things like that. And then I decided to participate in the ArtStation Learning, or not Learning, ArtStation Challenge. It was the Wild Wild West Challenge. And I took first place in that. And then after that, I had studios that approached me. That being said, I didn't necessarily get the first studio that I ever interviewed with was Respawn, and they told me no. I went like around a whole loop with them, and the position was for Jedi Fallen Order, and they told me no, and I was really bummed by it because I'd gone through like 2 steps of the 3-part interview process. And I really was excited for it, really hoping that I could get it, and then I didn't get it. And then after that, I talked to Turtle Rock, and then that was when I got in. So it took a long time for me to get in, and I wouldn't say that I struck out, but I didn't strike out because I didn't apply. I was kind of afraid of applying because I didn't feel like I was ready, so I wasn't going to apply until I felt like I was ready, which honestly, if I hadn't have gotten the opportunity, I don't know if I ever would have actually applied. So yeah, take that as you will. But I do think that kind of goes back to the idea of it just takes one really good piece to get noticed and get you your opportunity. So hey Jared, I was wondering if having less pieces and taking them to the next level by doing a rig and making a quick animation to showcase the character is maybe better than having more pieces. Rigging them and animating them doesn't necessarily make them better. I think if putting them in a pose is a good thing. I wouldn't say that you have to do an animation by any means, especially if your animation isn't very good. If your animation isn't very good, I would say that that's more detrimental to you than it is beneficial to you. It could definitely take it to the next level. So if you're good at animating and feel confident in it, go for it. I don't. I would never animate one of my characters because I'm not good at animation. But rigging it, if you feel confident rigging it and posing it, I would say that that's a good thing to have. Things that help take stuff to the next level is just good presentation, so a good lighting setup, a pose, showing good breakdown of like your textures and wireframes, and even different lighting setups and how your materials are responding to light under different setups is good. Excuse me. But yeah, so sorry guys, I'm trying to like catch up with all the questions and then I'll get back to the portfolio review. Watching your streams and waiting my character to render. It's been hours already. Oh yeah, I'm guessing you're rendering in something like Arnold. That's why I don't do offline rendering anymore. I hated waiting for it. Your story is really helpful. Seeing so many options out there gives me hope because game industry is just too hard to get in. And while I just need a job to grow myself. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I started outside of games. I know a lot of people that started outside of games. So if games is where you ultimately want to end up, don't be afraid to take other jobs in the meantime that pay the bills and then work on this in your free time. Is it possible that suppose I want to be a freelance artist? Am I in this industry since 3 years now and I am looking for big titles? I mean, I'm not too familiar with the freelance gig. I think that you kind of have to have a reputation for yourself or people coming to you asking you to work on such titles. So, I mean, if people are coming to you and asking you to work on those titles, then yeah, I think you can be a freelance artist, but I think that you just have to have some connections to kind of get to that point. Would it be appropriate if one chose to specialize in something like stylized versus realism, or doing both is expected? I would definitely say specializing is better. Tailor your portfolio to where you want to go. So if you want to go to somewhere like Blizzard, you should be making kind of hand painted, stylized creature, human characters. If you want to work it somewhere like Naughty Dog, you're going to be making people in clothes and more realistic, and maybe like a realistic monster isn't a bad thing to have. That being said, the other thing that I would also recommend is go onto ArtStation, and if you just search the studio that you like, you can see the character artists that work there, and it's a great opportunity to just like look at their portfolios, get an idea of what's in there, and then you can start to kind of direct your portfolio in that same sort of direction. Like to show you understanding the pipe and what's required for a character. Would that maybe be more interesting to a studio? Yeah, you definitely want to show the studio that you know what you're doing. You want to show them that you understand the pipeline. If you don't understand the pipeline, or you don't show that you can do a low poly, hair cards, texturing, things like that, then they're going to go, oh, well, you can sculpt really well, but like, I don't know if you can actually do the job that we need, you know? So being able to show the entire pipeline is definitely a must to get your job. I'm much more inclined to say like a thumbs up on hiring someone if they show me that they can make a character start to finish, as opposed to someone who just has really good sculpts in their portfolio. So, let's see. Hi, Jared. How do you convince studios to give you a chance when you have no experience? I seem to have a portfolio that draws in recruiters and interviews, but I can't seem to break through. That's a good question. A lot of it is just kind of the luck of the draw. You know, breaking in is the hardest part, and I don't know if you can necessarily convince the studios to give you a chance because you have no experience. I think that your portfolio has to do the convincing on its own. So if there's any doubt in that, or even potentially if they had, like, if some X person applied to a studio, they had no experience, and I applied to the studio and I have more experience, there's a higher probability that they're going to say, well, that person may have a good portfolio, but this person has a good portfolio and kind of the experience to back it up. So it's hard. It's tricky. You just keep chugging along, and eventually one will break through. I guess 90% of studios don't have junior positions. Yeah, I would agree. 90% of studios probably don't. I don't think of very many that actually do have junior positions. Is there a good resource you would recommend for job listings? I've only been using LinkedIn and ArtStation. Yeah, I think LinkedIn is where I usually find my jobs. Or like I said, recruiters kind of reach out and things like that. That's usually the place where I receive, I guess, tips or leads or people asking if I want to apply for roles and things like that is on LinkedIn. I don't really use ArtStation. I did at one point, but I don't really use it anymore. There is another site. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like it's a video game studio map, and you can see where all of the game studios are located at. I would try and find that. I don't know what the website's called. And look at all the studios, and then you can click on each state and you can, check their job listings and see what they have. I love your rambling. Well, that's that's good to know, because I can just ramble and ramble and ramble. Let's see. What do you think was the deciding factor to not landing at Respawn? The deciding factor was they wanted someone more senior. So, kind of the example that I illustrated. They were pretty far into development with Jedi Fallen Order, and they wanted someone who had more experience, whereas I was that guy that they would have to be kind of gambling on. So, yeah. Let's see. My portfolio on stream, a little bit afraid, but excited for that. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we'll just go ahead and jump into Gabriel next. So honestly, I'm a bit lost in terms of what exactly I want to do with 3D. I like two main things, environment and sculpture. I'm inclined in areas with concept art where I can express and create things like that. I know it's really broad and probably difficult to review based on that, but thanks anyway. Okay, so that is the first thing that I'll note. Those are three very distinct topics: concept, environment, and sculpture. You can be a concept artist that uses 3D to concept. You can be an environment artist that uses 3D to make environments. You can be a 3D artist that makes sculptures, but you probably aren't going to be doing all three of those things. So I would really kind of define um, where exactly you want to work and what exactly you want to do. Because a portfolio like this, that's the first thing that I would point out is a portfolio like this, it kind of sends a lot of mixed messaging, and I think you're spreading yourself really thin. Um, you're spreading yourself to weapons. You're spreading yourself to like diorama stylized environments. You're spreading yourself to UE5 castle environments. You're making some spaceships. Then you got creatures. Then you got people. And so there's kind of a lot that you're trying to get good at. So I would definitely recommend kind of whittling that down and figuring out what exactly you want to do. I think it's good to like all of those things, but for the sake of trying to get into the game industry, it does make things a lot harder. Um, because looking at this, if I sent this to a recruiter, they may question and look at this and go, "Oh, well, I think that he's actually better at environment than he is characters." Um, so just try and whittle that down and then hone your portfolio more towards that. Not saying that you can't do this stuff in like your free time, but I would keep your portfolio more rounded to one specific thing, um, so that it's a little bit more clear, and it doesn't send quite as much mixed messaging. Uh, Take that with a grain of salt. If you look at my portfolio, I have an environment in it and I have a couple of props. The reason I had those was because I was proud of them. I liked them. I didn't have any characters to put in my portfolio at the time. And the Decagon stuff was, I guess, kind of professional work. So I was like, well, shoot, I better put that in there because at least I can show that I've made something professionally. But looking back at it, it probably wasn't really helpful for me. Um, that stuff's still on my portfolio. So, again, to take it with a grain of salt, but just throw that out there. So let's just go ahead and kind of click through some of these. Okay. Okay, cool. So one thing I'm seeing with these that I feel like you have a decent understanding of, at least with those props and stuff, is kind of the simple stylized basic forms, which is cool. Environment looks pretty cool. Some good stuff in here. Nice to see exploring with kind of like some of that outdoor lighting, creating a tone or a feeling with it. That's always good stuff to see. And I think that that's one really cool thing about environment is you can really kind of tell a story with it. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So, right off the bat, the pieces that I would tell you that are strongest are going to be your environment pieces. I think that this piece has potential to it. This piece, these five environment pieces, I think are your stronger pieces. These ones are the stylized car is pretty cool. The diorama also pretty cool. This one I feel like you could probably get rid of. I think that you've shown that you are a little bit better than this one. There's some things about it that feel a little bit simple and kind of bring down the rest of the portfolio. So I don't think you answered, Gabe, where it was that you wanted to work. If you did, I don't think yeah, you didn't, which is fine. Um, but that's one thing that I would decide. Really just decide, do you want to do environments? Do you want to do concepting? Or do you want to do sculpture? For your creatures and stuff, I feel like the biggest thing that is lacking is kind of just an understanding of silhouette and form. Especially with like this guy, it's a lot of just straight tubular lines. There isn't really much structure to the character. So like if I was to walk over and fight this character, I feel like I could kick him in the leg and his leg would break off because there's not really much stability to the silhouette, which I feel like for something like this, you would have a little bit broader shoulders, you would have a little bit more defined legs to like support this upper mass. You would probably also have a little bit more like traps and things like that to support some of that weight. And I feel like with the silhouette, you aren't really reinforcing that. And then if you look at like the tubular arms, there it's kind of hard to determine what is the anatomical structure of this. And I know when people make creatures, they kind of make things up for anatomy, um, which a good creature artist doesn't quote unquote make up anatomy. They ground it in real anatomy. So like arms like this would probably still have biceps and forearm muscles, and having to figure out and decide how those are going to work um, is something that you want to be aware of. And same thing with just some of these other creatures and stuff that you have like this. There isn't really much underlying structural anatomy to define how this guy works. It kind of seems very inventive. So what I would recommend if you do want to do something like concept for creatures, I would start studying animal anatomy and human anatomy so that you can take those as like basic fundamental principles and you can build off of them to create things that feel very grounded and believable. Um, yeah, I would definitely work on that. And also, what I would work on too is I think you're jumping the gun a little bit with some of the detail, which this is a very common thing. This is like probably one of the most common things that I think a lot of people do is they sculpt a primary form and then they jump to the details. The details don't really matter. They can ultimately become a little bit more hazardous to the character in presenting it in a good light if they're there but you don't have any of those secondary forms. And here on this one it looks like you're trying to get it, but again those secondary forms don't really follow much design. They're kind of all just like swooping little lines that fall down here, and then you have a lot of like lines that go over it. So you want to think about that stuff is building that silhouette, giving this like torso area a little bit more coherent structure, and then kind of integrating a flow of like those folds and flaps over the top of it. That's kind of the importance of building those primary forms to secondary forms and then moving into the tertiary details. There's one thing that I could get across to just younger artists is sculpt, but don't worry about details. If you can make a good sculpt with good primary forms and good secondary forms, that is way more impressive to me personally than having all kinds of like high frequency details. So just take note of that. Work on those secondary forms. They're incredibly important and they're neglected by the art community, and they shouldn't be. Um, Same thing with this dwarf bust. I think that that's kind of what this is missing, is some of that understanding of the underlying structure and anatomy. So you have what looks to be kind of like your eyebrow socket right here, which would come back into this point of the ear right here. So you kind of have a lot of plane shifts, but then here you have like a line that's going across your nasal labial fold, which if you look at nasal labial folds, they kind of they fold and they bunch up right here. There's not a lot of lines that go across those. So just understanding that structure of how the face works in those primary forms and secondary forms, I think would be really, really beneficial to start practicing. So this kind of goes back to my whole general point about the portfolio. I would really just figure out what exactly you want to do, whether it be environments or concepting and so on and so forth, and try not to spread yourself too thin. That is definitely what I would recommend moving forward. I think that, like I said, your environments I think are your strong suit on these. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, and there's definitely been an improvement from piece to piece. So definitely keep that up. This one's looking good. This is a cool stylized one. Some good stuff. Some of this like stylized grass going on. This one as well. Working on some nice composition here, really kind of leading the eye to this center point. Same thing with this one. You have some guiding lines that are leading here, which is cool to see. So yeah, I like I said, kind of whittle down where you want to go and what you want to work on, and I think that that'll really kind of help you in the long run. And then put kind of just solely focus on that. Do the other stuff in your free time if you feel inclined to like take a break, but I would just kind of narrow it down a little bit more and work on that. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that gives some guidance too on some of the creature stuff, things that I think are really important to learn and understand. Definitely don't neglect those secondary form guys, because those are the best forms. And then last but not least, we have Crystal. So what Crystal said is, so I'd like to do characters and creatures. I aspire to create monsters with heavy detail and decomposition. My dream is to work on Doom at ZeniMax. Okay, cool. So let's just take a look through here real quick. Okay. Which this is obviously recognizable. Know this piece very well. This was it was a character from Back for Blood, which cool to see a fan art on. Okay. Okay, let's look at the Zelda one, which this I've seen as well too. Um, okay, cool. So Crystal, one thing that I would mention is you said you wanted to work on creatures, which is good. You kind of have an idea of what specifically you want to work on and where you want to work on. What I would do to continue to expand on this portfolio is I would probably show more creature stuff. Between the Zelda and this bride character, both of those are a little bit more on like kind of the stylized range of things. Um, and maybe more realistic for the Zelda one, but trying to introduce and work a lot more on like creature designs. So I would recommend finding some creature artists that you like that are concept designers. I personally love Stephen Oakley's work. I love Della Longfish's work. I like Rob Bliss's work. They all have really cool kind of creature designs and things that I like. And I just take those and make kind of their monsters because I like what they do. So building kind of a portfolio a little bit more around the idea of monsters, I think would be really good. From an art perspective, I think that the thing that is missing in some of the sculpts is, again, same as with Gabe's, some more of that focus on primary form structure and secondary form structure, especially in the Stinger one. I think is where it's going to be most noticeable. Like we'll look at the stomach right here. The stomach is kind of just one cylindrical mass. There isn't much breakup going on to it. Let's look at the sculpt. Yeah, see, so it's more of just a cylindrical tube with not a lot of form variation to it. But if we come down here to the actual concept, you can see there's kind of smaller breakup to it. So there's kind of a primary tube, which breaks into the rib cage, and then you have some of those secondary forms that break up the volumes that are built on top of that ab wall. So you have some like pockets of fat and things like that. Same thing back here. You have some of that anatomical structure that's supporting the back, where you have your lats leading down into your pelvis, and it looks like there's both of the lumbar muscles that are supporting right here. So I think that that's something that the portfolios could definitely use, or not the portfolios, the pieces definitely could use, is just a little bit further understanding of that anatomical structure for a creature artist. Like I said, massively important to understand anatomy, so that you can understand the rules as to which you're going to break. Because a lot of what anatomy is taking the rules and bending them and breaking them to feel believable for something that doesn't exist. If you don't have that good foundational primary forms and secondary forms, your stuff kind of starts to crumble. So I think that there's a lot of good stuff on this character, but I definitely think that pushing that anatomy and the primary forms and secondary forms can help it. And then same for this one. I think that there you show some understanding of kind of like the chest region with the collarbone, and some of these forms do feel a little bit wobbly, especially like Yeah, some of these lines, they feel a little bit shaky. So just refining those a little bit more. And same thing up here. So you can see this kind of like upper eyelid fold. There's like a form, a dip in, a form, a dip in. So those are some of the things that you probably want to just try and structurally refine and really get solid, and then work on that secondary breakup of them. Um, so that it feels a little bit more cohesive and structured and kind of put together. I know that you're working on this still, but that's just one thing that I saw. I think that from what I saw from the textures and stuff, they looked like they were headed in a good direction, and I know I gave you some feedback on those, I think, at one point. But yeah, that's definitely what I would say. I think making more creatures would be good. Um, Definitely would help the portfolio to leading towards that. The other thing that I would recommend, and this is for anyone that is wanting to do creature work, um, check out some different artists that work at places like id, because a lot of those places have really good creature artists. So like Jason Martin is the lead character artist there, or the character art director, and he's an amazing sculptor. He's one of the creature artists that I've looked up to since I've been doing this stuff, and he has really cool stuff. And you can kind of see, like, for this piece, there's a really strong understanding of like where the rib cage is at, where the pelvis is at, some of the anatomy and structure of the legs, and how those muscles weave together. There's a very good, strong understanding of anatomy, and that's what makes all of these creatures feel really believable. Even with like the Doom stuff, there's a structure to the anatomy. There's the rib cage. There's those same lumbars that I was talking about. There's also a perceived hip bone right through here. The leg and knee anatomy feels like what you would expect a quad on a person to feel like. Same thing with the forearms. So all of this is based on real world anatomy, and that's why it feels so good and believable. So yeah, that's definitely what I would recommend. Just some work on the primary and secondary forms, I think would help. Just really work on making those forms smooth and readable and distinct, and don't just stop at like that primary shape. Pushing it a little bit further, I think would really help. So that was the last one, which we are at an hour and a half. I feel like my voice is like super raspy. Let's see, what have I missed in terms of questions? I don't think I've missed too many. Um, Making connections is the toughest thing these days. People don't reply, and I feel very sad at the point when they don't reply. Yeah, unfortunately, that's just the world. One thing to remember is, depending on who you're reaching out to, not everyone is outgoing or willing to talk to people, or even studios with not replying. Studios are busy. We are making games, and like I said, a lot of people apply to jobs, and not every application is going to get a response, which is unfortunate. I don't think that that's necessarily right. Like, people take the time out of their day to apply to a role or a position. I think that the least a studio can do is at least say, "Oh no, sorry." Um, but it kind of is what it is in terms of trying to make connections with people. It's kind of hard, like, I can tell you that from my Instagram, I have lots of people reach out to me, and I try my best to respond to everyone. And sometimes I don't have a lot of time to respond. Sometimes I respond to people with like novels, kind of how I rant on here for. But sometimes I don't have the time to do a deep dive on things. But I try to. So don't get beaten down. It just takes time. It takes a lot of time to make connections and things like that. You look good in beard more. Oh well, thank you. I don't have a beard right now, so I just buzzed my face to shave down my 5 o'clock shadow. So how can I share my portfolio? I think that was already answered. I just graduated, and is it better to have 2 to 3 great pieces or 5+ mediocre pieces? 2 to 3 great pieces. Quality is better than quantity. You could have one amazing piece, and it could get you a job. So yeah. Please check my portfolio. I'm not checking any more portfolios for this stream. I think you already have an answer. Always quality. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Just nervous because 2 pieces seem very low, but I guess if they are good enough, I should be okay. Yeah, two pieces is fine. Just to show you guys what I had in my portfolio when I got my first job. So I had these Decagon pieces and this library, which axe those out. Didn't matter. I mean, it's cool because it shows I can make props, I guess. Didn't matter to me for getting a character position. I had this character, I had this hair and this face, which those are both the same thing. And then I had this Wild West challenge. I think that these two helped, but I don't think that they were the primary reason that I got my first job. So I only had 3 characters in my portfolio, and then I got a job off of that. And then since then, I've made all this other stuff. Let's see. How can I share my portfolio? I mean, where to put the link to get feedback? Please reply. I've replied to that one a couple of times. No more portfolios for today. Thank you. Just nervous. Okay. Closed. Jared will make a prompt in his story. Yeah, so I'll make a prompt in my story for future ones. Thanks a lot. I can see now, and someone saying was really helpful. I will reflect on what I want to do. I have 1 year of 3D, so it's great to hear that. Yeah, that's you're headed in the right direction. I mean, I started 3D in 2011, and didn't get my first job in the game industry until 2019. So takes a lot of time. I definitely think it takes endurance. So if you don't feel like committing a large portion of your life to it, you may not necessarily succeed. And that sounds kind of harsh, but for me, it wasn't like I rolled out of bed, decided I was going to do 3D, and then got a job 6 months later. So I will try to focus on enhancing my sculpture, learn more anatomy and secondary forms. Yep, I would say that for everyone. Learning more anatomy and secondary forms are great. I can't find Jason Martin on ArtStation. I would just search Doom then. Let's see. Hi, I've been working on my first head for a few months now to learn anatomy. Now I'm fed up and want to finish it. Could you give me a few critiques on it later before moving on to tertiary detail? Yeah, I mean, if you send it, I can try and look at it if I get time. But I would say, yeah, focus on those primary and secondary forms. Tertiary details for a head, who cares? They're not important. What's your personal workflow? Does it change? Yeah, my workflow changes all the time. Sometimes I adopt things that are faster. Sometimes I do things that are not fast. So honestly, there's a lot of things that I do that aren't fast. I don't use Texture XYZ for my skin textures because not fun, kind of boring. I don't, I prefer to paint it by hand. It's a little bit more fun. Same thing with cloth. I don't use Marvelous Designer for my personal work. I don't even really use it in professional work because I like to sculpt cloth and it's more fun. I like to do stuff by hand. Takes a lot more effort, but it's enjoyable. I like to do things that way. So I definitely don't have the quickest workflow by any means. Sometimes it's a little bit slow, but sometimes it's fast. You're a good man. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Do you review portfolios every week? No, I do not. What I try to do is I try to sculpt on stream every week. Portfolios are kind of like a once a month sort of thing, if that. Kind of just depends if I have the time or not. Also, now looking at your portfolio, are you modeling with the intent for the characters to be game ready, or are you using a more poly UV sets in these renders for display purposes? When I was doing my portfolio, this, and this, those were all game ready. Yeah, those were all game ready. I could present all of those. You can. I think that this has like breakdowns of it. Yeah, so all game ready. Same thing with this piece. You can see some of things like that, some of the UVs, some of the texture sets. All of these were built with the intent of being game ready. Now I just make characters. I don't really care too much about triangle count or texture sets or things like that. I just want to make things that look cool. So if you look at this guy, for example, this dude is not game ready. This dude had like a couple 100,000 polys, I think, on him. Um, it was only like one texture set, but it definitely wasn't like meant to be game ready. It was just meant to make a cool piece, and that's kind of what I do now. Even with like this guy, this isn't game ready. This was just a cool piece to make, and that's kind of what I focus on doing now with my time. But that's because I have the portfolio to back up that I can make characters for a game. I have all the Back for Blood stuff. I have lots of examples showing that I can make a character for a game, so I don't really have to focus too much on that. But yeah, definitely don't take too much into consideration for poly count or things like that. But I do like to still present my characters in the best possible light and show off, a lot of the hard work, and show off the sculpt and show off the details, and break things down, because I feel like it's more interesting to show some of that stuff. You can see some of the process, things like that, some of the texture revisions, and just all the changes that went on to make this guy what it was. I think all that stuff's really cool to see, and I like to share it. So that's kind of why I do it. Um, let's see. Your CGMA link description is 404. Oh, interesting. I'll have to take a look at that. Right now, working on a new artwork, so there will be another one for your next portfolio review. Cool. How would you approach it to be game ready if you were to use it? Would you retopo and then decimate the high poly and bake it? Yep, that's what I would do. Do a low poly, bake it down. I saw a hair card workflow that was ultra slow, like one vertice by one vertice, and I don't know if that's correct. What do you usually do for game hair? Yeah, so one vertice by one vertice, that I would have to see that, because that I've never seen anyone work that way. But for this was all just laying hair cards, uh, but it was moving and bending the hair to conform to the head vertice by vertice. So that's what you mean. Yeah, it's slow. Hair's never a quick process for the most part, unless you're really good at it. But I don't tend to do hair very often because I don't like it. I don't find it fun. So if you look at like my personal work, this is game ready hair, this is game ready hair, this is game ready hair, and then all of the other pieces like this one and this one, these are using XGen. I prefer to use XGen because it's quicker and I don't have to place hair cards. But if I was to what I do now is I use, I don't even remember what it's called, CS Curve tool, I think, for card placement if I need to. That's kind of a quick tool to use. But again, I don't do hair very often, so that's one of the tools that I use to place hair cards. And then I started using Fibershop GS Curve tools for Maya. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Easier to place cards and kind of bend them and conform them and stuff like that. It has some good controls, super easy. So I started using that, and I also started using Fibershop to make my cards. So yeah, I hate hair cards. Not fun. Job is the most hard thing to do for me. My experience was very bad, and they didn't give me the whole money they promised. They always forced me to overtime. They even humiliated me. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. It's never good. Working conditions are deserved. How do you usually pose your work? Transpose I transpose in ZBrush. I usually just mask things off and slowly kind of pose them that way. For this character, for my ArtStation Learn piece, this piece was posed inside of Maya. I built a quick rig for it and then just posed it that way. Yeah, quick little pose. Not the greatest pose. Honestly, I'm not the best at posing, but whatever. Okay, so we're at an hour and 43 minutes. I mean, I might as well just hang out and talk for a little bit. I'll close this out and open up ZBrush and I'll sculpt while we chat for a little bit. Let's see. What programs do you primarily use? AKA, what's in your Batman utility belt? So the programs that I use are, let's see, what do I use? I use ZBrush, I use Maya, I use Marmoset, I use Substance Painter, I use Unreal, I've used XGen for personal work. What else do I use? I guess I use GS Curve tools, if you really consider that a tool. Fibershop I've used. That's about it. I don't really use too many things. I tend to kind of just do what I can with the tools at hand. I prefer to do things with the workflow that I know. So if I can do it in ZBrush or Maya, I usually go those routes to do things. If you already reviewed our portfolios, is there a chance you would review it again? So I'm not sure. I know that this review session, I had a lot of people send their portfolio that I have reviewed on stream before. Maybe I could do like a 6-month progress or like maybe a year re-review of people's stuff to see like what's different and what's been added. I think it's hard because I haven't done that many portfolio reviews. So obviously I want to give everyone kind of a chance to get seen. But even with that said, I think it's sometimes you can't really review someone's portfolio from 1 month to the next just because like they don't necessarily have enough time to like add multiple pieces or like really overhaul a portfolio at that point. So it's a possibility. I definitely wouldn't say that it's not going to happen. But I think it would probably be a little bit longer out than like a couple months. Actually, let's see. Quick question for XGen: how do you make hair so that they don't interact with other meshes? I don't think I do. I think on the times I've done XGen, I think that they've interacted with other meshes. So I'm not sure. When are you going to release your orc? That's a good question. I have it ready to release. I just haven't made any of the YouTube videos, which is kind of why I haven't released it yet. I was planning on like co-releasing that stuff, which is a bummer. I just haven't had time to write the video for that, which I'm hoping I might have some time this weekend to actually start writing it. Things have just been busy with the CGMA class, and that has been why I haven't been able to make new YouTube videos, because I have a ton of footage that I need to edit from the orc and the neomorph piece that we did on stream. But yeah. You deserve more views. That's all. Good night from India. Thank you. I appreciate that. Maybe, views aren't all that matters. I just enjoy streaming and blabbering about games and this industry. I really enjoy what I do, and I'm very thankful and fortunate for the opportunity to make games for a living. I know that it is something that a lot of people would like to do, and so I try not to take it for granted. And I feel like this is a way that I can give back and teach and give people some insight into things that I may think, I guess, or know about the industry from what I've learned. But that being said, obviously I only know so much, so I kind of speak on things that I feel like I have some idea on, but that's about it. Big fan of your work. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. I'm a digital sculptor and worked on a miniature and statues. I want to change my path to make characters for games. What advice can you give me? I would say if you've been making stuff like that, you're headed in a good direction. I'm assuming you have an understanding of ZBrush, which is good. I would get an understanding of something like Maya or a place where you can start to learn retopology. I would also start to learn UVs. So really, I would just start to learn the pipeline and the process for making a game character. Um, Learn how to texture inside Substance or an equivalent. And yeah, that's kind of what I would recommend. Just kind of learning the process and the um, way of making characters for a game, and kind of learning the ins and outs of that, and then make characters. That's really what it's about. If you have a good, strong understanding of making figures and characters, I'm sure that you probably have a good understanding of anatomy and things like that. So you're already off on a good foot, I would say. Is XGen good enough for showing game-ready characters, or is there a better program? Don't use XGen to show off your game-ready characters, because XGen is not a game-ready character um, workflow. I do that because I don't really need to show hair cards, so I don't do them in my free time. I just do XGen because it's faster and I like it. But if you're trying to get a job and you're showing your characters with XGen, uh, you can, but I would also show that you can do hair cards. And hair cards is going to be the method of showing that you kind of know what you're doing. So. Okay, so we got a couple of teeth left. I think we can probably duplicate this, move this one up, get rid of this. Delete. Then we're going to flip this bad boy and rotate him. Boom. Now he's got a new tooth. Hi, I just joined in the live, so sorry if you've gone over this. Could you elaborate on your journey and what it was like for you starting out, if you haven't gone over already? Yeah, I did go over it, but I don't mind saying it again. So I attended a university to get a degree in film and media, actually, and at that time I wanted to work at Blur. That was where I really wanted to work. But then one time I decided, oh well, let's try out like learning a game pipeline and workflow. And so I did an independent study learning how to do games, game characters, which I don't know if it really was an independent study. I had to figure it out myself. I didn't really have much guidance on it. But while I was at the school that I went to, I didn't really feel like I had the best understanding or knowledge of what I needed to become a game character, or to so that I could become a game character, so that I could become a character artist for games. So I attended CGMA after I graduated college, and then from there, I took a mentorship for a little while, and then I got my job at a contractor, worked there for a couple of years, and then I got into the industry after about 3 years of um, working at that other place. So that was kind of my path. That tooth, I think, needs some love. Let's do... Nope, not that one. This one, move this out of there. Sorry, gotta manage these a little bit better. I have these split up into two folders, one for the upper teeth and one for the bottom teeth. So reconstruct those subdivisions. Merge. Wait, is this one? Okay. Merge down. Cool. There we go. Got some back molars. Need to define some of these shapes a little bit more. I think you should take it for should take it for granted, though, all artists to be good enough for a job, not to mention to be as good as you. Must have sacrificed tons of time, effort, and frustration to get it. I mean, yeah, I definitely put in a lot of time. I can't say that I didn't put in a lot of effort. You know, but I think that does kind of come with the want to get in. You know, if you really want it, you can. You just have to put a lot of time and effort into it. And I will say I put a lot of hours into it. You know, I went to school, college for 4 years, and I wasn't getting really the lessons or guidance that was guiding me towards getting into the game industry. I took a intro to Maya class, in an advanced Maya class, which I got like an understanding of it, but I had to self teach myself ZBrush for the most part. So I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials, did my own characters, which actually, shoot, I guess I could just show those. What I was doing in college. Maybe this will give you guys a little bit of boost in confidence. Let's see. This was from a long time ago, but this was from 8 years ago. This is what I was making. This is what I was making 11 years ago. This is the first thing that I made. I'm gonna mute this because this was the first thing that I made 8 years ago or 11 years ago, or not first thing. This wasn't the first thing, but this was definitely when I was in college. So this is when I was learning 3D to begin with. Not good, really not good. So takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, but you can definitely get there. But that's part of why I keep this stuff on here. You know, I think it's a good way to recognize the fact that like it took a lot of time to get to where I am. But you know, you can do it. You just have to work at it. You just have to put a lot of time in. Here's one of my characters. I remember I submitted this character for a portfolio review, and I was so sad when they were like, oh, this is wrong, the shader doesn't look very good, the anatomy doesn't look good. And that portfolio was with people from Blur, and I still remember that. And I was like, well, shoot, that sucks. You know, that was kind of a bummer, but keep working at it, you know. Um, and I kept working at it. And then, you know, you can see, look how bad that looks. That looks so bad, so terrible, so terrible. This wasn't even like a hand done retopology. This is me just like, oh, I'm going to Z remesh something. And then this looks terrible. It's bad. It's not good. Here, you know, this looks terrible. All this stuff looks really bad. But I just kept improving. Here was the first game character that I ever made. Look at that. That's terrible. Hot garbage. Not good at all. So, you know, if you feel discouraged at any point, just come back and look at this hot garbage. You definitely improve. You just have to put a lot of time into it. These were some of the characters that I made when I was in college, and just with each piece, I kept trying to get better and better and better. And like here was a game that I helped with when I was in college, and you know, I got to make some like cool little robot pieces and texture them and things like that. And this was like my first real experience with making a game. And then, you know, here's an updated portfolio. I think like a year later, character I made for a short film for school, which again, this is an improvement from what I had. It's not great, but it was an improvement. I was able to improve. Here was a portrait that I made, able to improve, but still not great, you know. Still kind of figuring things out, figuring out a workflow, my proportions, my shading, my hair, all of that stuff was not very good. Same piece before. Here's another one. Here's a creature. I didn't understand anatomy very well at this point. And, you know, there's not a lot of underlying structure or anatomy to this character. There is in this design. I should remake this design because this is a cool piece. But, like, I sculpted based off of what I saw, not based off of what's actually there. I didn't understand the skeleton that existed underneath the character or the skeleton that I was trying to make. So I just sculpted, like, spherical forms that I saw. And you can see that, like, on this side. I just sculpted abs, you know? I didn't have really any structure to the anatomy. So that's why, you know, kind of harp on the importance of anatomy. It makes a big old difference. Here's another character. This silhouette is really boring. There's just a couple of pieces on top of it that kind of added a little bit of interest to it, you know. Then there's this ugly guy that Blur was like, this sucks. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get better. And so I did. And I just kept working at it. And then here's me disappearing from 8 years ago to 10 months ago when I actually started posting on the channel. And definitely was a long time, a lot of effort. But you know, if you really like it and really want to do it, that's kind of just what you have to do. So, sorry again. I just keep going on rants, guys. I apologize. Let's see. Okay, so we're about at 2 hours. We'll probably cut the stream here in just a couple minutes. Let's see. You start with Dynamesh, right? Yeah, it just depends what it is. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but most of the time I do. I've been getting an error with my 3D Unfold plugin in Maya. I reset my personal, no avail. Maybe it's non-manifold geo issue. How would you identify and fix this issue? I don't know. I would have to see it. I'm not really sure. I couldn't tell you what the issue is, unfortunately. Still reviewing portfolios? No, I am done with the review for today. Also love Blur Studios. Yeah, I love Blur. Blur is an awesome studio. A lot of cool stuff, but that game character that was in that portfolio, that was the turning point for me where I realized I no longer wanted to do film or VFX because I hated clicking a render button and waiting for 45 minutes to just see what the image looked like and then being like, oh crap, I forgot to turn a layer on. You know, so definitely didn't like that. Definitely like games, and especially now at this point, they're so close that you know, this alien piece, this looks like it could have been rendered in an offline render. So I don't really see much point for it anymore. Do you know what could fix the issue when Marmoset in Marmoset my baked normal mesh has some lighter spots with backface culling out? I'd have to see it. Unfortunately, I can't. I'm not sure. Just wanted to say thank you. Say that you are the most patient character artist I've ever seen. I mean, honestly, it takes a lot of patience to stick at something for a very long time like this, and I think that that's kind of what art is. And for most people, it's not a quick road. For me, it wasn't a quick road. You know, I started in 2011, and it took me a long time to be able to do it professionally. Did it take 8 years to get the first job? First job doing 3D? No. My first job doing 3D I got in 2016, but the level of 3D that I was doing was pretty low. It wasn't a high bar. I tried to push the bar with that job and make better things. And while I was at that job, that was when I actually made this piece. This wasn't for it. This was when I was doing CGMA course. And I was still just kind of trying to push my own skill. But then, yeah, to get into the game industry, I started 3D in 2011 and got in 2019. So yeah, it took me 8 years to actually get a job in the game industry. So there's one thing I have is definitely perseverance, I guess. Let's see. I wish I could make that monster back then when I graduated from college. Yeah. Oh, those two heads there on around my current level. Yeah. I mean, you can see there's definitely from that portfolio, and at that time I've learned a lot. Learned about lighting, learned about color, learned about silhouette, learned about shaders, learned about texturing. You know, I tried to improve on all of those different aspects and just continue to raise them. And as I've practiced it more and more, I've just gotten better at understanding that stuff. And you know, each piece you kind of learn something, and hopefully from each piece you can take something where you can grow off of for the next piece. And one thing I would recommend, sorry, I'm just rambling. I'm sorry guys. So if you're bored, feel free to leave if you don't want to hear me ramble anymore. But I think for one thing that I think is really useful for me is trying to pick characters or pieces to learn something, so that I can take those as ways to improve. Each project I try to improve on, and that's the best way that I can recommend doing it is with each portfolio piece, just pick something that you want to improve on, whether it be hair cards or something like that, and pick a piece that revolves around it. So yeah, hopefully that helps you guys in the way that it helped me. That's kind of how I try to study or improve on things, and that, like, even with these pieces, part of the reason why I did these demonic Pokemon pieces is one, because I love Pokemon, but two, I wanted to continue like personal work in the realm of creatures, and so I think that that's one of the really nice things about Oakley's pieces is they're creatures, but they're all different. This is very different to the Dragonite piece that I did, which is very different to the Paris piece that I did. So each one's a little bit different. I can kind of flex different skills, refine or practice different things. Like this piece was probably the most challenging of the three, because I was kind of having to figure out how to like make this stumpy body anatomy. Like the legs, I'm not gonna lie, the legs and the feet I'm not a huge fan of. The upper body I think looks really good, or at least I'm happy with it. But it was a challenge. Each piece is kind of a challenge, So, I'm starting off with characters and wanted to know how characters sculpted with different poses and expressions are used in studio pipelines. Is it for blend shapes, rigging, or something else? Yeah, so we always pose in a T pose. We sculpt in a T pose, and then from there you'll kind of build off of blend shapes. And then the rigging team will rig the low poly, and then if you need to like do correctives and things like that, you can. But for the most part, I just make the character in T pose, and then we build stuff off of it after that. Rants are good. Thanks, Alex. I'm glad. What if I have a great knowledge of sculpting, also drawing like 10 years ago, understand and use artistic principles, but have luck of routine, have lack or have luck of routine about tech. I'm not sure I understand. But I mean, if you have an understanding about art and things like that, that's great. That puts you in a really good spot. I think a lot of people, they like when if you look at my portfolio that I showed from my YouTube video, I knew how to use the software, but I didn't have a good understanding of the art side of it. So that's why a lot of that stuff sucked. I didn't have an understanding of anatomy, or at least I thought I did. I didn't. Um, I sculpted what I saw as opposed to understanding why I'm sculpting something. And texturing, I just threw colors together, and I didn't really think like, oh, complementary colors, or um, composition, or making things not noisy, like, oh, well, I want blood, so I'm going to put blood everywhere. Whereas opposed to now, I think about it in like I'm trying to create a story or a graphic read or something that feels more coherent. Um, and that's the art side of it. The art side of it is just as important, if not more important. Actually, no, it is. It is much more important than just knowing how to use the software. If you know how to use the software, that doesn't mean you can use it well. And a lot of that, I think, stems from understanding art. So definitely take art classes if you haven't. Learn drawing. You don't have to be good at drawing, but maybe just watch like painting classes. Like go to Mark Burnett's YouTube channel, watch some of his drawing videos. You can learn a ton about art from him. There's tons of different artists on YouTube that I would recommend watching, especially when it comes to drawing or painting or photography or things like that. And you will learn more from those than you will by just being like, okay, well, I'm going to make a character and then just making it. You want to get an understanding of those artistic principles and why things work, and what you can kind of incorporate into your own character, and how you can make it appealing. So, your rambling is coherent and informative. Well, I'm glad to hear that. What do you think is more important? Personal project, which is more fun, or focus on learning and practicing, which is boring, but you can focus on what you want to learn? They don't have to be different things. I think that you can practice learning on a personal piece. Like this piece, I'm having tons of fun with this, but I'm also practicing things. I'm going to take it to texturing, and I'm going to be practicing my hand painting on it. It's something that I'm not super confident in at. I can kind of get by, but I just trying to refine that workflow, and getting good results. And so each portfolio piece, you can have fun with it, but just pick things that you can learn. If you want to make like a barbarian character and you're like, well, I stink at hair, it's a good opportunity to practice your hair. You're learning, but you're also doing something you enjoy. Practicing and learning doesn't have to be like, oh, well, I'm sculpting 500 hands. Well, go find creature hands and practice on those if they're more interesting. It doesn't have to be boring. How would you approach topology of a character that has over 100 million points? I would decimate it and then just retopologize it in Maya. Not really anything different than I would do for any other character. Okay, we'll finish this last tooth. And let's scale this one up just a touch. How can you learn the art side? Learning the art side, take an art class, learn drawing, learn sculpture, learn form, take a photography class, watch YouTube videos from painters, watch sculpting videos from sculptors, learn anatomy, learn line, learn silhouette, learn color, learn composition, learn primary colors, secondary colors, things like that. Anatomy is incredibly important. So YouTube is a great resource. There's a lot of very talented artists on it. You just got to take advantage of it. Okay, we'll sculpt this last one and then we will call it done here. So I'll try and get these questions answered while I do this. When sculpting from concept art, should the final render pose be the same as in the concept, or is it too static? You can pose it a more dynamic pose. I mean, if you feel so you can pose it differently. I pose my characters differently than what the concept has, but the main thing is just be careful. Don't pose it in something that doesn't look good. I would say even arms down by the side, a little bit of like an offset of like the shifts in shoulders and hips is more than enough in a lot of cases. But yeah, just you don't have to follow the concept if you feel like the pose isn't great or whatever. If you want to do something different, I don't see much wrong with that. A pose is better than no pose. So you can see all these teeth. They're pretty messy. They're not very exciting, but that's okay. In regards to anatomy and the amount of courses that are out there, are there any in particular that you recommend taking? I took my anatomy course with Christian Bull on CGMA, and I believe he still teaches it. So I would recommend him. He has an incredibly refined knowledge of anatomy. He knows the muscles inside and out, and he's who I learned it from. And I learned a lot of good stuff from that. I would also recommend the Anatomy for Sculptors book if you haven't seen that or used that. That's a really good one to have as well. There's also some live lessons from Raf Grassetti on his store teaching anatomy, so that's another option as well. What is or do you have a stream schedule? I don't right now. My schedule's been really kind of wonky. I'll stream again this week on probably Tuesday and Thursday morning, I think, is what I'll do. But yeah, that's kind of what the schedule looks like for this week. But I'm not sure about the coming weeks. I've just been really busy. Got to finish some stuff up, and then hopefully we'll be back to it. So, okay. Let me see. What this looks like real quick. I'm going to bring this bad boy up. It shouldn't have that much of a snaggle tooth. Okay, look at that. Not pretty smile. I'd call it done. Just got to work on the gums, but I think we're going to go ahead and probably call the sculpting here for right now. When's your next stream? It'll be on Tuesday morning, I think. Absolutely love Christian Bull. His concept-based way of teaching sticks. Yeah, definitely worth learning from. I've always been considering a few CGMA courses included that exact one, so that's reassuring here. Yeah, definitely would recommend it. Are you sculpting the teeth subtools in Subdivision? And would you export to Bake, or would you merge it all in Decimate? For this piece, I am probably going to export all of the teeth separately and just decimate and bake off of those low polys, because I don't want to worry about low poly on this character. I don't really care too much about doing topology and things like that. So I will just lower it and jam it into the gums for the final version, which may have some misalignments, but oh well, it's not a big deal. I'm not too concerned about it. So, but yeah, with that said, thank you guys, everyone who came and stopped by. This is a really long stream, but a lot of good stuff, a lot of good conversation. Obviously, I appreciate the turnout and everyone that came by, everyone that submitted. Yeah, hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you guys later.